withered into a decaying fiefdom. Fields that had yielded bountiful harvests were now overgrown with weeds. Trade caravans had all but vanished, and the finest of its people had abandoned their homeland in search of a better future. Few dared to hope that you, the last of an ancient dynasty, would succeed. Curb your appetite. For centuries, tradition dictated that taxes in the northeastern lands, stretching from the Satir Mountains to the Shadow Valley, were collected by the army stationed in Okor, a fortress perched on the border between your kingdom and the Duchy of Thorn. The residents of these lands, simple peasants and artisans, had grown accustomed to this arrangement. The army provided protection and, in return, collected annual taxes set by the king himself. But times have changed. After a series of weak monarchs with diminishing authority, the army began to take greater liberties. What was once an annual duty transformed into a quarterly burden. The people could not replenish their stores quickly enough and struggled to feed their families. Smoldering resentment erupted into open rebellion. The commoners united under the leadership of a former blacksmith named Gorman, a man of both strong hands and an even stronger will. "We will no longer feed their bloated bellies," Gorman proclaimed at a gathering in an old barn that served as the rebels' temporary headquarters. "Let them work the fields themselves if they want our bread. We will pay taxes only to the king, as it should be. No middlemen, no greedy collectors from Okor." Word of the rebellion spread swiftly across the northeastern lands and beyond. People defied the soldiers and even clashed with them directly. The army found itself in a precarious position, unwilling to use force against the people for fear of inciting a larger uprising. Gorman and his followers sent envoys to the royal court, demanding justice. Their appeal was straightforward: restore the old system and allow the commoners to pay taxes directly to the crown, bypassing the avaricious collectors in Okor. Upon hearing of the revolt, you grasped the gravity of the situation. This was not just about taxes, it was about authority. If you acquiesce to the commoners' demands today, they will learn that force can achieve their goals, and this will not sit well with the army, nor with many others. Your decision shocked everyone. What does the church have to do with this? What were you thinking? In the end, only the servants of Lumen appreciated your choice, and no one else did. There is no sadder story in the world. The Cattleman's Alley was bathed in the light of the setting sun when tragedy struck, shaking the peace of the capital. Two noble houses, the E. Montecu and the I. Calopeto families, whose names were always on the lips of the city's high society, clashed in a deadly confrontation. The feud between these families had roots that stretched back through the ages, but this time it ended in heartbreak. Young Tibor Incalopeto, a fiery youth with pride ablaze in his eyes and heart, challenged Mercurio y Montecu to a duel. Their clash, like a bolt of lightning, unfolded before the astonished citizens. What began as heated words soon escalated into desperate blows. Before anyone could intervene, Tibor's blade pierced Mercurio's chest. The blood of the young Montecu streamed onto the cobblestones, mingling with the dust, forming patterns as if an invisible artist painted a final masterpiece. Mercurio's last words were filled with bitterness and curses, echoing across the hushed square. The old feud reignited with new fury, like a spark igniting dry straw. The Montecu family, stricken with grief and rage, demanded justice. calling for Tibor to face harsh punishment. The Aicalipetos, on the other hand, claimed the duel was fair, and that Mercurio's death was nothing more than a tragic but rightful conclusion to the conflict. Your behavior resembled that of a tribal chief. But was there truly a better option? The butler's advice. The butler catches you poring over documents belonging to your predecessors, the previous Dauphin. Much of what you have read today could only be described as drivel, such as Gilbert the Glutton's 76 donut recipes or Magnus the Heretic's annotated chess games. However, a significant portion was penned by Sigurus the Recluse, perhaps the most accomplished of the changing kings. He was only 4 days shy of coronation. You stretched lazily, allowing your still young bones to creak like those of an elder. Your Majesty, Adrian the Firmir Holloway begins, his tone reverent but firm. May I offer some advice? Everyone is eagerly awaiting a sign of your favor. Countess Ivinchel, Holy Father Lumiel, and General Bardarian have already arrived in the capital. It is widely believed that the first audience granted by a new ruler signals where their loyalties will lie. You recall your conversation with the butler yesterday and decide to probe further. And if my Majesty were to show favor to the common folk, who should I meet with? For a moment, the all-knowing Adrian freezes, caught off guard. Then he recovers and answers, "Sir, that is somewhat unconventional, as the common folk have no formal representative. However, I suppose you could forego meeting the three high-ranking figures and instead visit the nearest village. Such an act would send a very clear message." In less than 15 minutes. Reliance on the army. The doors of the hall opened without a knock, and the general appeared in the doorway. Bardarian was completely bald, his head gleaming under the torchlight, with several scars crisscrossing his skin, each telling a story of countless battles. His face, rugged and sharp with deep wrinkles, spoke of years spent on the battlefield. His dark, penetrating eyes were sharp and observant. A slight hint of bulkiness only emphasized his powerful physique and commanding presence. Bardarian stopped in front of the throne and bowed his head in respect. "Your Majesty, I thank you for this honor," he said, his deep, gravelly voice resonating through the hall. The king nodded, inviting the general to speak. Bardarian straightened, his gaze turning serious and determined. "Your Majesty, I have come not only to express my gratitude, I have come to speak plainly. If you choose to support the army, you will have no allies more loyal than us. The army, and I personally, will stand by you until the end. We will die for you, if necessary." The general paused, letting the echo of his words ring in the silence of the hall. Then his tone turned harsher as he continued. "But the history of our kingdom remembers those who chose otherwise. Take King Anzabal the Peaceable, for example. As you know, his reign was the shortest, just 99 days. He believed that maintaining fortresses and supporting the military was too costly for the treasury. First, he disbanded his personal guard, and then he began cutting troops and reducing funding for military facilities. Bardarian took a step forward, his eyes glinting fiercely. By the end of the third month, the troops marched into the capital. Without much ceremony, the king was executed in the main square, beheaded. Anzabal thought peace could be bought, but he failed to grasp one simple truth. Without a strong army, there is no peace. Yes, the army never fully recovered, but we learned our lesson. We will not allow such a thing to happen again. The general bowed his head once more, paying respect to the king. "I say this not to frighten or threaten you, Your Majesty. The Holy Father and the Countess may never speak so directly, but they have plenty of ways to depose a Dauphin, as they have done before. We believe in you, Your Majesty. As a token of our friendship, the army will undertake the restoration of one of the capital's critical structures." It is, of course, reassuring to have an ally like Bordarian, yet you cannot shake the thought that your uncle Anzabald was coldly beheaded by the very general of his own army. Stingy and even stingier. In the early days of your reign, news arrived of the death of Igar Pagan, a notorious miser aristocrat and possessor of untold wealth. His name was synonymous with greed and hoarding, and even in his final days, he remained true to his principles. Having no direct heirs, his many relatives eagerly awaited the chance to claim the vast fortune hidden within the depths of his desolate mansion. However, Igar Pagan's will proved a fitting epitaph to his life of stinginess. In his final decree, he ordered, "My wealth shall go to no one, bury it with me." This command caused a wave of outrage and debate, and the matter was brought before you as the supreme arbiter, with the hope that you would bring justice to such an absurd situation. The new ruler is kind and just. Though your treasurer vehemently disagreed, the aristocracy warmly approved your decision. If the stars are lit, you toss and turn restlessly in bed. The pillow is far too soft and your neck quickly stiffens. My first royal decree should ban soft pillows, you think, rising from the bed. In the fireplace, a single log crackles faintly as it burns out. Sleep eludes you on your first night as sovereign. Will you be able to bear such a heavy burden? Will you even survive to see the end of next week? Questions upon questions. Suddenly, a brilliant flash lights up the room, and you hurriedly step out onto the balcony. A star! A falling star! The palace guards shout in excited voices below. Many witnessed the falling star tonight and saw it as a good omen for the start of the new king's reign. However, there were also those who believed this reign would be as brilliant and fleeting as the star's descent. Let's do business. With the last trading ship came news that smugglers had settled at the northern end of the Bay of Storms. Such rumors could not go ignored, and you, resolved to uncover the truth, set out with a large group of guards. The journey was long, but your determination and desire to address the situation carried you forward. After navigating through an endless series of coves, you arrived at the site by nightfall. Before you stretched a hidden world, shielded from the eyes of law-abiding citizens. A secluded cove surrounded by high cliffs served as the perfect refuge for the smugglers. Along the shoreline, torches blazed brightly, and dozens of people bustled about, their activities muffled by the sound of the waves. Your group went unnoticed at first, but once a sharp-eyed lookout raised the alarm, panic ensued. Some scrambled into boats, trying to get as far from the shore as possible, while others dived into the water. Meanwhile, two men raised their hands high in a gesture of peace and approached you. They introduced themselves as Ludon and Luc Fonchel, the leaders of this illicit enterprise. Their operation involves smuggling goods from Cacao and Dalaman to bypass the kingdom's customs. According to the brothers, desperation and harsh trade policies implemented by the previous Dauphin, Sigarus the Recluse, had driven them to this life. Sigarus had imposed high tariffs to replenish the treasury. Fonchel claimed that almost every resident of the northern Bay of Storms was involved in smuggling in some way, storing, transporting, or selling goods. Even the military, aristocracy, and peculiar red-robed cultists allegedly ordered exotic fruits through them. For the first time in years, locals were no longer living in abject poverty. The brothers offered any assistance you desired, as long as their lives and trade were spared. The smugglers began sending you regular financial gratitude, but the aristocrats were less than forgiving. The harder the training, the harder the battle. You accepted General Bardarian's invitation to attend the annual military drills near the fortress of Acor, located in the northeastern part of your kingdom. This event was an opportunity to witness the finest soldiers of the realm in action. The fortress of Acor loomed atop a hill, its walls and garrison serving as the shield between your kingdom and the Duchy of Thorn. Thorn's golden age is long past, and today it poses no threat. But 30 years ago, a young Bardarian earned his first scar beneath these very walls. The gates of the fortress creaked open, and you rode inside on horseback. The inner courtyard was bustling with soldiers, their faces a mix of curiosity and interest. General Bardarian stood at the base of the main tower, greeting you with a broad smile and a welcoming gesture. "Welcome to Acor, Your Majesty. We are honored by your presence at our annual drills." You followed the general through the fortress, observing the soldiers' training. Warriors honed their skills on training dummies, shot arrows at targets, and performed coordinated group assaults. This ritual was not only a demonstration of their prowess, but also a testament to their discipline and endurance. Time flew by, and the drills concluded with exhibition bouts using practice weapons between the best soldiers. Watching the mastery of your finest troops wielding their swords, you felt reassured about the kingdom's future. "Your Majesty," Bardarian said, "I know you trained extensively in your youth with both sword and rapier. Would you care to demonstrate your skills against one of my soldiers? I am certain it would leave the impression we desire." Your opponent was a round-faced young lad with a farmhand's build. Who had he been before becoming a soldier, a shepherd, a stable boy, a farmer? He gave you little time to wonder as he charged with a ferocious assault. A less prepared opponent would have collapsed under his relentless, well-practiced strikes. But not you. Swiftly parrying his next attack, you struck back with trained precision, delivering a series of crushing blows. By tomorrow, those blows would leave impressive bruises. Your opponent lowered his head, conceding defeat, while the crowd of soldiers erupted into cheers. The maze to nowhere. You stumble upon a massive, cobweb-covered portrait of your great-great-great-great-grandfather, Tartagon the Builder, in one of the castle's far corners. Family legends claim that he was the one who completely rebuilt the capital and the royal fortress. Overcome with a sudden wave of gratitude toward your noble ancestor, you order the portrait cleaned and hung in a more prominent place. However, the servants discover a hidden entrance to a dark underground passage behind it. Will you send someone to explore it Descend yourself or leave the secrets untouched. Someone called Indiana and his group of companions claimed to have been exploring the tombs of ancient kings long before your majesty was even born. This time, however, they found nothing of value, only spiders and bat droppings. Nevertheless, they charged as if they had discovered a diamond the size of a fist. Silver lining. You sit in the throne hall, watching the play of light reflecting through the stained glass windows, when a group of peasants and a noble aristocrat appears before you. Their faces are tense and anxious, and you realize that you are about to make another difficult decision. When were they ever easy? At the head of the peasants stands the village elder, his face lined with deep wrinkles. Next to him is a young shepherd, judging by his attire. Opposite them stands the aristocrat, Edward III Melwood, haughty and confident in his claim. 5 years ago, the common folk rented a patch of land in the foothills for my Melwood to graze their sheep. The land seemed barren, but for the peasants, it was their only hope of feeding their families. Fate, however, had other plans. While grazing their sheep, the shepherds discovered a rich vein of silver. They kept their discovery hidden from the landowner. When Edward III Melwood learned of the silver, he demanded the return of all the extracted ore and immediately sought to terminate the lease, claiming that the resources of the land were his by right. The desperate peasants have come to you, their king, to seek justice. Deep down, the common folk understood that keeping the mine was too good to be true. They accepted your decision with gratitude. The nobleman, however, was far from pleased. He had been robbed for months and was then forced to let the thieves leave with their loot. Merely a piece of iron. A star fell somewhere in Verador, the ancient, uninhabited forest in the southern part of the kingdom. Searching for it could take weeks, yet you have a strong feeling that finding it is essential and that it might play a significant role in your future. Will you launch an expedition? You fussed quite a bit during the trip, making a couple of rash decisions along the way. The guards, of course, didn't dare contradict the king, but they would have finished faster without your involvement. In the end, all that remained of the fallen star was a small piece of iron. The fragment was unearthed and handed to a royal blacksmith for further study. trapped in the snow. Of all the fortresses in your kingdom, you liked Acre the least. On one side, it was battered by the cold winds of the dark ocean, and on the other it was hemmed in by the Satyr Mountains, perched in a narrow isthmus. Acre's massive gray walls and clumsy wooden barracks bristled against the world, a reminder of centuries spent defending the kingdom from the once mighty realm of Thorn, now reduced to a small and defenseless duchy. Yet despite the unrest currently brewing in Thorn, this was not the topic of your meeting with Bardarian. Acre was the domain of the army, just as Cherry Island belonged to the aristocracy and Argandor to the church. Today, Bardarian presented a plan for military reform. For the first 2 hours, you found his presentation engaging. The head of your army was far more animated than, say, Holy Father Lumiel or Countess Ordvinchel. But as the endless numbers and statistics piled up, your eyelids grew heavy, and your yawns became so obvious that even the seasoned general could not fail to notice. The awkward moment was interrupted by a messenger bursting into the council chamber with urgent news. In the Satyr Mountains, at the Caridon Crossroads, a large caravan from Kokeo had become trapped in a snowstorm. Typically, merchants from this country transported their goods through Thorn, crossing the bridge over the chasm to Acre, or less often via routes near the Reinhard fortress. However, the unrest in Thorn and the bandits active in the forest near Reinhard had led them to choose what they believed was a safer path. Their wagons and carts carried valuable goods, sturdy armor for the army, spices and honey for the aristocracy, and unfinished jewelry intended for the church's religious trinkets. A decision was needed immediately. Without help, the caravan would likely freeze in the mountains. The general bowed and left to assemble his troops. Bardarian had previously mentioned that the army dislikes being used for tasks unrelated to war or the kingdom's defense. But in this case, he remained silent, likely because he was personally invested in ensuring the caravan's safe arrival. However, the mission was far from easy. Winter was already in full force in the mountains, and by the time the frostbitten troops arrived, the caravan's merchants were barely holding on. There were no fatalities, but the harsh conditions left dozens of soldiers with frostbitten hands and feet, rendering them unfit for battle. Yo ho ho and a bottle of rum. In your youth, you loved reading adventure novels, often featuring pirates. In those tales, sea rogues were depicted as merry pranksters and jokers who drank rum, found themselves in ridiculous situations, and then somehow clumsily wriggled out of them. Sometimes they were portrayed as brainless villains, easily outsmarted by the hero. Perhaps such pirates existed somewhere, but certainly not in your kingdom. Recently, you had been receiving reports that, despite the turbulent autumn seas, pirates were raiding coves in the Storm Bay and looting small coastal villages. Today, the Elder of Quiet Haven, a small fishing village known for catching fish and crabs, came to you in tears. Your Majesty, it is a disaster. You are our only hope. Those damned villains have taken our villagers captive. Woe upon my gray head. What am I to do now? The old man explained that yesterday pirates had raided the village but did not stop at looting. They had taken half a dozen villagers captive and threatened to sell them into slavery if a hefty ransom was not paid by tomorrow's sunset. The rampage of pirates in your kingdom is a direct result of the kingdom's low defensive capabilities. In any case, you must now decide how to handle this situation. The hastily assembled units failed to approach the pirates unnoticed and were spotted from afar. As a result, the sea rogues escaped with the captives. Their fate remains unknown. We are on fire. Your butler woke you in the middle of the night just a couple of hours before dawn, shouting, "Fire! Fire!" Usually calm and stoic, Adrian. Holloway's face was now overcome with panic. In the rush, you even forgot to put on one sock, looking so disheveled and comical that your servants might not have recognized you as their ruler. Thankfully, the fire was not in the castle, but in one of the capital's prestigious districts, Corridoria. Fortunately, only 4 houses were destroyed, and the combined efforts of the townsfolk and a timely downpour brought the blaze under control relatively quickly. By morning, only the smell of smoke lingering throughout the city served as a reminder of the event. During breakfast, Adrian apologized for his overly emotional reaction and confessed that his once wealthy family had lost everything in a fire when he was just a young boy. Gathering his courage, he suggested that you consider establishing a firefighting service in the capital. Fires in Valandor and its surroundings were not uncommon and could at times cause significant damage. The very next day after the fire, dozens of workers hastily recruited from the port arrived at the site. The local nobility was pleasantly surprised. The workers quickly cleared the rubble while an enhanced guard detail watched over the salvaged belongings. Although the nobles will have to rebuild their homes themselves, no one expected such a generous gesture from the new king. The aristocrats were genuinely impressed. Holy Father's only weakness. The only known weakness of Holy Father Lumiel was chess. His eternally stern face and ascetic lifestyle somehow coexisted with the spirit of an avid player who had honed his skills to a remarkable level. In every match, he displayed an unparalleled ability to foresee his opponent's moves and plan several steps ahead. Perhaps there was not a single noble in the kingdom who did not know how to play chess. A good game was considered a hallmark of not only great intellect, but also a sign of refined aristocracy. This evening in your study in Valandor, the atmosphere was especially tense. A popular opening, the Dalaman Gambit, was unfolding on the board. Holy Father Lumiel favored an aggressive attack with 2 knights, always aiming to seize the initiative early on. His fianchettoed bishop ominously eyed your king, shielded by a solid wall of pawns. 2 hours into the game, silence reigned in the room. Occasionally, you and your opponent stepped to the window to gaze at the slumbering city and release some of the tension from the complex match. "By the shadows of Tenebris," the Holy Father murmured almost inaudibly. "I did not see that." You studied the board intently, recalling tales of Magnus the Heretic, a king whose chess mastery was so exceptional that he could easily defeat nearly any opponent. Unfortunately, that was the sole highlight of his reign, aside from his infamous clashes with the church. Your opponent began shifting his minor pieces erratically, constructing a mysterious combination. What was he plotting? Rumor had it that the church had not deposed Magnus solely for his heresy. Holy Father Lumiel allegedly had personal grudges against the ill-fated king over their chessboard encounters. Of course, it sounded absurd, yet people believed it. Arguably, the end of your distant cousin Magnus the Heretic's reign was the most enigmatic among the many changes of rulers. His body was never found, and some whispered that Magnus still lived, hiding abroad or even retreating into seclusion in the Satyr Mountains. Whatever Lumiel was aiming for, his white pieces attack had stalled. You executed several skillful moves, pushing all his pieces to the board's edge. All that remained was to finish your assault and suffocate the opponent. After deliberation, you found an intriguing combination that would deliver a checkmate in 5 or 6 moves. Your opponent observed your every move intently, his gaze devoid of emotion. No, there could be no mistake. The choice before you was clear. Launch an immediate attack or continue building up your positional advantage. You purse your lips and bow your head, conceding defeat. Opting for positional play over a decisive attack, you slowly lost your advantage. In chess parlance, you were outplayed on skill alone. Your Majesty, you played well, but failed to decipher my plans. Understanding the enemy's strategy is the key to victory in this game. Sometimes one must yield and make concessions to lure the opponent into a trap. And sometimes one must not fear launching a bold attack, carefully calculating every move. Merely a piece of iron? You enter the workshop just as the blacksmith finishes examining the gleaming fragment of the fallen star. After the chilly streets of Valandor, the room feels unbearably stuffy, and you are tempted to shed your cloak despite the breach of etiquette. The young, muscular blacksmith greets you with a friendly smile and informs you that he has carefully studied the fragment. Nothing extraordinary. If you had not mentioned it fell from the sky, I would not have noticed anything unusual. The only thing I can say is that working with this metal makes my head spin, similar to working with lead. You bid him farewell, informing him the fragment would be collected the following day. However, the next day, you are told the blacksmith was found dead. There were no signs of foul play. It seemed as though he simply lay down, fell asleep, and never woke up. None of the blacksmith's belongings appear to be missing. It seems you will need to find a new blacksmith. The strange cosmic metal, which may have caused the blacksmith's death, has been moved to one of Valandor's cellars. Who knows? Perhaps it will be of use one day. A tinker on the road. You are traveling with a small retinue from Lucor, a port city in the southeast of the realm, to the capital, Valandor. The road winds through dense forests and open plains, while the wind carries the faint scent of salty sea air and pine trees. During one of the stops, as the evening silence began to wrap around the forest, you heard a clear voice coming from the direction of the road. It was a tinker, walking along the path and singing a simple, carefree tune. The tinker's trade was on his back, with pots and pans in the pack. Through the forest paths he'd go, selling goods both high and low. Every village knew his name, buying wares of well-earned fame. Though the journey might be long, his spirit kept him strong. The people say that a tinker pays twice for kindness, but only if you buy something from him. Of course, you suspected that it was the tinkers themselves who invented this superstition. It is no wonder people turn to tinkering. For a pinch of sea salt, a ram steel knife, and a bundle of needles, he charged you quite the sum. Still, your guards nodded approvingly at your extravagance. Luck will surely follow your company in the coming days. Looking for the blacksmith. The sudden death of the blacksmith deeply troubled you. What is a castle without its own smith? Your inept ancestors had driven away most respectable professionals from the kingdom, including skilled blacksmiths. You quickly realized that if you wanted something done well in your kingdom, you often had to do it yourself. So you set out to find a new master craftsman to fill this vital role. After extensive searching and numerous recommendations, a story about a talented blacksmith named Doran caught your attention. He was renowned for his masterful forging technique. However, there was one small problem. What kind of problem? You were told you would have to see for yourself. You arrived at a small village on the edge of Verador called Little Hills. The houses, all wooden, reflected the village's close proximity to the forest, where timber was the only available building material. Expecting to locate the forge by the sound of hammers ringing, you found nothing of the sort and decided to visit the village elder for help. On your way, you passed by a drunken figure sprawled in the muddy autumn dirt. The elder's two-story wooden house towered over the surrounding huts like a watchtower. As you approached, the elder rushed out to greet the unexpected royal guest. When you explained your purpose, he let out a heavy sigh. No doubt about it, Doran is talented like no one else. But my help in finding him is unnecessary. He is lying right over there. Indeed, the drunkard wallowing in the mud was the legendary blacksmith. When he is sober, there is no better smith in the entire kingdom, but he drinks heavily and often. Even the Dalamanites tried to hire him, but things did not work out. A week later, the heavily hungover blacksmith was settling into Valandor. You had a sinking feeling that this would not be the last of your troubles with him. Minor ailment. The morning was cold and windy when you began to feel a faint tickle in your throat. The air, imbued with the scent of autumn leaves and the distant sounds of the forest, suddenly seemed heavy and sticky. You, accustomed to the freshness of the morning dew in the royal park, now felt your body betraying you with fatigue. By noon, when golden rays of sunlight finally pierced through the dense autumn clouds, the signs of an impending cold were impossible to ignore. Your nose began to run, and every attempt to take a deep breath triggered a cough. It felt as if the air was filled with tiny needles that pricked your throat with each breath. Eventually, you decided to settle into your favorite armchair by the fireplace. The warmth of the fire was soothing, but it could not banish the chill that had settled deep within. A hot cup of tea with honey and lemon, prepared by your ever-attentive butler, provided slight relief, but the persistent headache refused to relent. The herbalist prescribed 2 decoctions, one with chamomile and another made from mashed raspberries. It seemed absurd to you, but the herbalist knew better. You diligently followed their advice, and by the 5th day, you started to feel better. Perhaps things would have improved faster if you had consulted a proper doctor. Murder of the pawnbroker. In the western village of Padiak, an event occurred that chilled the blood of all who heard of it. A peasant named Rasko, driven into a corner by poverty and desperation, sought relief by borrowing money from the local moneylender. This decision proved fatal for 3 people. His creditor, Smerda Islid, known throughout the region as the Old Usurer, relentlessly pressured Rasko for weeks, leaving him with no hope of salvation. Smerda's sister, Anna, lived with her, a quiet and submissive woman, little more than a shadow of her domineering sibling. On a dark night, as if nature itself wished to conceal the madness about to unfold, Rasko gripped a heavy axe in his trembling hands. What occurred in Eyelid's home that night was described by the village elder with such detail that it left some women who heard it pale and faint. The following morning, Rasko, tormented and broken, turned himself in. His confession was cold and detached, as if he were recounting someone else's tale. News of the double murder spread like wildfire across the kingdom, It seemed Rasko's fate was sealed, a direct path to the gallows. However, the jury, seeing him as a victim of circumstance and believing he was not of sound mind, sentenced Rasko to ecclesiastical penance in one of the distant Luminite monasteries. People whispered many had hated the old usurer, though they pitied the meek Anna. Among the aristocracy, a storm of outrage erupted. Shmerda was part of their circle, and such a lenient punishment cast doubt on the integrity of the court. Representatives of the nobility demanded true justice, warning that relations between the aristocracy and the crown might suffer greatly otherwise. People are disheartened by the king's decision. Does this mean the court's rulings hold no weight? However, the aristocracy is quietly celebrating their small victory. No good deed goes unpunished. Reports have reached you about a mysterious cult emerging in the Bay of Storms. Known as the Red Hoods, their actions stir both curiosity and concern. They distribute food to the needy, not just simple bread and vegetables, but often exotic fruits and rare delicacies that the common folk have never encountered before. Informants say the Red Hoods demand nothing in return, refrain from any unlawful activities, and behave with an almost unsettling level of politeness. The commoners are delighted, praising not only this enigmatic cult, but also you, the new king, whom they credit for allowing such generosity to flourish. Yet behind this facade of kindness and altruism, there may be more at play. Perhaps it is only a matter of time before their true motives are revealed, or perhaps not. Your caution did not yield any positive results. The church wonders why you did not nip the new religious cult in the bud.